Hi, my name is Scott Allred, and we got connected with New Hope back in October 2008. And at the time, Christy and I were trying to transition from a church from Lakeland to Brandon, and we had a few churches on the list to go visit. And the first one that we visited was New Hope, and never went to visit anybody else. So it really seemed to meet everything that we were looking for in a church. So I've kind of always had a faith. I always believed in Jesus and I accepted him. On May 8th, 2004, we lost our second son, Adam, at birth. Christy had a ruptured uterus. And it was really, really difficult. It was a difficult week. It was a difficult time. It was a difficult recovery. I really wanted to turn away from God, and I was turning away. I was involved in some leadership in the church, and I was trying to figure out how I was going to get out of that. And I just didn't believe. I really had lost my faith. That Saturday on May 15th, Christy and I were at a funeral, and it was a funeral for our second son. And at the funeral, Christy collapsed. And I can remember looking over at two of these really, really close friends of the family, and they happened to be radiologists. And one of them was one of Christy's best friend's father. And he came over and he put his arm on me and just looked at me. And there was no words we were saying, but when I looked into his eyes, I just knew that, like, wow, this is serious, that, he didn't think Christy was going to live. So of course there was some other actions, and by the time some other things were happening, people were mentioning to pray. And I just remember thinking, it's not going to do any good. I'd prayed for Adam, I'd prayed for Christy, I'd prayed for their safety. Through my life, I'd prayed for different things. And I didn't really ever seem like it was answered. It seemed like a one-way street. So over the course of the next few, 30 minutes or so, the neurosurgeon gathers his evaluation, and he comes and meets with me, and he said, listen, Christy's had a very, very large bleed on her brain. It's a hemorrhage. And right now is critical. The only thing we can see to do is we need to alleviate the pressure off her brain. And so I want to do a procedure, but to put a shunt in. And I just said, hey, doctor, if this was your wife, what would you do? And he said, I would do this. So I said, okay, then do it. So he goes up, and again, I can remember people saying, we need to pray. And I remember looking around that room. It was almost like slow motion at people's emotions, and how people were just, I was like, praying's not going to do any good. So over the course of a little while, I can't remember if it was maybe an hour or so, the doctor performs the procedure, and goes into and he calls us up, and I remember walking up, and I was a little bit behind Christy's parents, and I remember looking at them in this room. She was in an intensive care room, and the doctor was coming out, and he had just spoken to her parents. And I looked, I said to the doctor, I said, doctor, how do you know this worked? And he said, I'll never forget this. He said, Scott, she's not dead. And I was like, wow. And it just kind of blew my mind at that moment. And he said, there's nothing else we can do for her. And it was just complete silence in this room. It was just Christy and I. And I can remember walking up to her at that time and grabbing her hand and saying, God, Christy needs you, and I need you. And at that moment, there was a presence in the room that was uplifting, unlike anything else. And I knew everything was going to be okay. And over the next 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours, Christy kept making a miraculous recovery. It was totally a miracle. There was not a person, not a physician. There was nothing medically that could be done. The only one that could save her was God. And it was a true miracle. And it changed my life tremendously spiritually. And I never look back. At this day, I 100%, I know that God's real. He's a part of your life, and he can perform miracles. And that was my encounter with Jesus.